All right. So now our next topic is a little Disney corporate news, which always relates to the parks too, because anything with corporate trickles down into the parks because the parks are such a huge part of the company.
Yep.
But the other day, Sheryl Sandberg, who is actually an executive at Meta, formerly known as Facebook. She's been with Meta or Facebook for 14 years. Okay, she was a bigwig. She was number 2 to Mark Zuckerberg. Number 2. Okay, she was way high on that food chain. 14 years. She just announced her retirement. She's leaving Meta to retire. Okay, so now you're probably thinking, what the heck does that have to do with Disney? Well, it has a lot to do with Disney because, as we've mentioned on this show many times, Matthew Bellany. Now, Matthew Bellany is a Hollywood attorney, very well connected, as well as a former Hollywood Reporter editor, if I'm not mistaken. The guy has connections. He's not just some random dude on YouTube or some random person like this. He is very connected to Hollywood, very, very much. And he tweeted this out, I believe it was yesterday. I'm going to share you the tweet. There's actually a couple tweets I'm going to share you. But it says here, this is from Matthew Bellany from Puck News. Okay, so he's kind of quote tweeting the New York Times. And the New York Times tweeted out, breaking news, Sheryl Sandberg, the chief operating officer of Meta and the second in command to Mark Zuckerberg, said she was stepping down after 14 years. Matthew Bellany says Disney wouldn't. Would they? Narrator, yes, they would. That's interesting. Now, this guy is very connected. And from what he's saying here, if you're going to go based on this tweet, it sounds like, I mean, he's not being wishy-washy in this tweet at all. He's not saying, well, keep an eye on Sheryl. Maybe she'll land a job at the Walt Disney Company. He's pretty, would they do it? Yeah, they would. It sounds pretty confident, right? Dre, overall thoughts on this tweet in terms of Sheryl possibly coming in maybe to replace Bob Chapek? Look, Chapek has been an embattled CEO. He's got he's had PR disaster after PR disaster. There's been rumors that they might not renew his contract. They're looking for somebody else. Is it possible that this is happening, that Sheryl might step in and replace Bobby Chapek?
I mean, it's kind of an interesting deal here because, look, I mean, Chapek has been embattled ever since he took the CEO position, right? And he's had enemies from all across the industries, entertainment, and so forth. Look, the stocks, I mean, yes, the stock market itself is down, but the Disney stock has looked better for sure. It's slowly recovering, but just, slowly. They've been embroiled in controversy with Chapek, Disney has. And, we have heard, OG, George, we've heard, from our various sources that, the board maybe is looking at other, replacements, Tom Staggs, Peter Rice, and so forth. Sheryl Sandberg, I mean, she's accomplished, right? She has now, been the right-hand gal, so to speak, to Mark Zuckerberg, leading one of the biggest internet conglomerates that the world has ever seen. Does she have the chops to run Disney? Absolutely. Would the board be interested in somebody like that? I think they might be. It's fascinating, right? I remember hearing a long time ago, years ago, when Bob Iger had actually just acquired Lucasfilm, that the board was maybe possibly looking at a replacement for Iger in the form of the first female CEO for the company. The thinking was that, they felt that Disney was a progressive company and that its leadership should reflect those values, to be quite frank. And so, this definitely fits in line with that kind of thinking right there. It's a really interesting prospect that there was somebody that could lead, Disney from the outside ranks. Maybe it is a Sheryl Sandberg type figure. And we all know that Disney's trying to model itself on kind of an internet or tech company, right? You know, the metaverse, as you know, Bob Chapek speaks about. Maybe it is somebody who has experience in Meta, or hey, maybe a president position to run alongside Chapek. That's also a distinct possibility, right? And that could have its upsides as well. This is a very interesting, fascinating conversation, one that OG and I have had extensively leading up to this, and it's got the wheels turning. That's for sure.
Well, yeah, and this is somebody. If you guys, if those of you that are watching at home, and go ahead and go on YouTube after the video is done, obviously, but go on YouTube and search Sheryl Sandberg. And you'll see interview after interview after interview. She is a smoozer, just like Bob Iger. You see her on Stephen Colbert. You see her on Oprah Winfrey. You see her. She is a smoozer. You'll never see Bob Chapek sitting in a wicker chair outside talking to Oprah. Okay, you're never going to see that. You know, Sheryl Sandberg is much more in line with that whole PR image thing, like Bob Iger is. She's also a woman. Okay. And I know a lot of people don't like the identity politics, and that's fine, but it's still a reality to our world that we live in. And Disney as a company might be interested in having a woman lead their company. It's just the way it is. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. I can definitely see that being a possibility. Another thing to consider too here is if, like what Matt Belloni is saying, where he's kind of confident, like this is happening, like, at least from my interpretation, it sounds like pretty much she's coming over to Disney. If I'm interpreting that correctly, she wouldn't leave her cushy job as number 2 to Zuckerberg over at Meta to go to Disney if the Disney thing wasn't a done deal. If the ink wasn't, if she didn't sign the deal and it's ready to go, she wouldn't have left Meta. Yeah. Okay. She's not going to leave Meta if Disney was just courting her. She'd only leave Meta if it was a done deal, confirmed. She's got the job. So this tweet from him is very interesting to me because if it's true, it seems like she's already got a position locked in. We'll have to wait and see. Again, this is speculation, and there is actually a counter opinion from Belloni's own website. I'll share with you guys in a minute that kind of counters and refutes what Belloni's even saying, which adds a little more complexity to the issue. But George, before we dive into the other comment, what do you think about this?
I mean, yeah, I think, you know, it's the way of the land right now, you know, as you had mentioned, OG, you know, you don't really want to talk about like the politics sides. A lot of people don't like to, but I mean, it is what it is, you know. What better way for Disney to have a forefront representation of who's going to run this thing than a woman, you know? And I think if she has the credentials and you know, the resume, so to speak, and the portfolio to back all that up, then that's even, you know, icing on top of the cake, you know? And speaking of cake, I mean, her coming at the top of the food chain below Zuckerberg, I mean, she's going to have to bring it down a little bit, especially working with Christine Waistlines McCarthy, you know? So, I mean,
yes,
as Mr. Fast Guy puts it, so robust.
So robust, right? Oh man, you know, it's you know, George, I like how you took the food chain analogy and took it literal. Oh boy, that's quite amazing. But yeah, this one was particularly interesting. OG, why don't you go ahead and give us some context here?
Okay, so this is Dylan Byers, and Dylan actually is a contributor, an author to Matt Belloni's website, Puck News. Mm-hmm. And he is Dylan, just to give everyone at home a little background on Dylan. He's a veteran media reporter who has served at NBC News, CNN, and Politico, reporting on the business of media, technology, and entertainment. Okay, so this is a colleague of Matt Belloni that we just saw a second ago, right? And he's saying something kind of contrary to what Matt was saying. Says here, quote, "Whatever the case, Sandberg's day has come, and the departure announced this afternoon on Facebook will inevitably invite all manner of speculation. What I am told by Sandberg herself, as well as several other reliable sources inside Menlo Park, is that there's no dramatic backstory. Sheryl came, she built, and now she's ready to move on, to live a more normal life, to get married, which she will do this summer, and to do more work with her foundation. She will also continue to serve on Meta's board of directors. Now, I do want to give a shout out to Alia Aloha, who actually shared with me this quote. She is a subscriber of Puck News, and I want to give a shout out to her for sharing this with me. I want to thank you, Alia, for that. But Dre, now this is a little bit of a departure from kind of like the definitive statement that Villani said with his tweet, like, it's happening basically. And this guy's saying, hey, you know what? Not so much. I talked to her. She said no.
Yeah, it's we're getting conflicting stories, right? Which is why some people are saying that Melanie's bias might be showing, right? He's maybe not necessarily a big fan of Chapek and maybe wants to see him removed and is trying to get the ball rolling, so to speak, and be ahead of the story and not necessarily reporting on the facts at issue here. Look, I mean, we will know pretty soon here if Sandberg, remains on Meta's board of directors. Well, wouldn't that necessarily be a conflict of interest with Disney, and wouldn't she have to resign her post in order to take up that new one? I mean, that's going to be the kind of key indicator there. I would think. I would assume that there would maybe be a conflict of interest. I'm not sure, but it is kind of one of these things where we've got a lot of names being thrown around now, and stories to cover for them, so to speak. Arguments to be made.
I'm not 100% sure, though, if it'll be a conflict of interest, because Bob Iger served on Apple's board for a long time while he was CEO of Disney. The only reason he stepped down, from what I understand, is because Apple started a streaming service, and that created a conflict of interest because now you had Disney Plus and Apple. But I don't know of anything that Facebook really does that would really conflict, but I could be wrong on that. I'm just kind of...
Well, Bob Chapek talks a lot about the metaverse, so to speak. If they were to have their own kind of virtual reality interests, would they necessarily conflict? I don't know. I'm not sure. I think it would be telling if Sandberg remains on Meta's board of directors and doesn't, leave her post, so to speak, to go to Disney. This is quite fascinating, and like I was saying before, you could make arguments for and against any of the prospective, people in that kind of short list of people that the board might be looking at in terms of courting for Chapek's position, and like you said, OG, it comes at an interesting time because Chapek's renewal is being argued right now, and those renewal terms and what his salary might be and so forth. So while those negotiations are taking place, we see all this stuff popping up. It's a fascinating world.
It is. It's very fascinating. And look, where there's smoke, there's usually fire. Okay. And we've heard rumors, and we've heard from good sources, a friend of ours, who I won't mention by name, extremely close to Disney's situation, was saying that they were courting other individuals. So that, on top of the whole Sheryl Sandberg thing, indicates to me a lot of smoke. That at the very least, the board is considering their options. Maybe not a confirmed, done deal or anything like that, but they're at least considering. And I do remember that Sheryl was on the short list years ago when Bob Iger first announced that he wanted to retire. I think it was like in 2012. Sheryl Sandberg was on that short list along with Meg Whitman of eBay. They were both listed as possible successors to Bob Iger. So my antenna went up when I saw Bellani mention her again with such certainty. And I gotta say, if you guys, I can't stress it enough, go on YouTube, check out her interview. She's very Disney. Okay, I'll just put it that way. She's very Disney. She's a very polished, image-conscious, Bob Iger-esque kind of executive. She'd fit right in. In my opinion, with current Disney, I think she'd fit right in. But we'll see. What do you think, George?
Speaking to the statement that you had up, that I feel like we've heard, and it may be very true, but we've heard this time and time again,
Yeah.
where people leave their initial company, they want to retire, they have personal endeavors, they want to succeed, and then 1 month later they're with another big name brand company, and it's like you can't just rely on just saying, oh, well, she's going to get married this summer, and maybe want to work on her foundation, but is that truly what she's really going to step down as number 2 from the Meta to do that? I don't know. I think that step down from something like a Facebook, that I think that there's something more going on that between her and Disney that has yet to be revealed.
Well, yeah, you're 100% right, George. I mean, look at even Bob Iger. He retired. Remember, Bob Iger said all the same stuff that she said to this guy. I want to retire. I'm living my life now, unemployed. I'm just going to relax, enjoy myself. And Bob Iger has joined like half a dozen companies already, like Funko Pops, some Meta universe thing. Remember the whole like Avatar he released?
Right. Yeah.
There's been at least a half a dozen different companies that he's been now connected to since he retired from Disney, including the rumor from Grace Randolph that he's counseling or advising Zaslav and Warner Brothers.
Mm-hmm.
So much for retiring and sitting on the beach drinking a Mai Tai. This guy's been busier now than he was when he was running Disney, So it's like, come on, like when I hear stuff like this, I agree with you, George. I'm just going to retire. I'm not going to do anything. I'm just going to relax and work on my foundation and get married. I sense a little bit of BS there. And even on a smaller scale, we've seen this with like actors and actresses in Hollywood. How many times did we hear Andrew Garfield say to the camera, point blank, he's not in Spider-Man No Way Home? And he's like in a quarter of that movie.
Yeah, I mean, it's, look, it could be it could be disinformation. It could be, look, and to the same extent, right? These talks about potential CEO replacements, that could be, smoke just billowed out to give the board leverage in terms of the negotiations with Chapek. Like, hey, you know what? If you're not okay with taking this salary or this compensation package or whatever, we got people lined up who might. So it can work both ways. I'll tell you what, though. I mean, some of these people in these positions, a lot of times they don't go quietly in the good night, right? They a lot of times get involved into other things, and maybe in some cases bigger and better things. And a presidential or CEO position for somebody like Sandberg, I mean, that would that'd be a nice little feather in the cap right there. So this is definitely something to watch. Again, we're seeing it from a single source. It's Matthew Bellany's kind of out there on an island right now. I don't think anybody else is reporting similar rumors. But this is definitely something to watch, guys, because, these things, as we've learned in the last 2 years, these things can change on a dime.
Sector 2. Malfunction in Sector 2. All droids will be shut down for reloading of labor programs. Stand by for power disconnect.